Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. Ethan Warren stood at the edge of the construction site, clipboard in hand, double-checking the steel reinforcement plans for the new community center. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a warm orange hue over the dusty lot. His fiancée, Vanessa, had texted him a few minutes ago, reminding him about their dinner plans with his family. He smiled, thinking about her. They had been together for 4 years, met in college, fell in love slowly, the kind that felt inevitable. Everything in Ethan's life was aligning just right. His career was taking off. He had just been offered a project manager role with his firm. Vanessa had recently opened her own boutique in town, and his parents were finally warming up to her after years of cautious observation. Even his younger brother, Eric, more of a free spirit and less settled, seemed to be finding his place in life, working with a local media company. But that evening, as Ethan climbed the steel scaffolding to inspect a higher support beam, something went terribly wrong. A loud creak echoed through the air, and before he could react, the metal beneath him gave way. Time felt like it slowed. There was a rush of wind, the sharp, panicked gasps from workers below, and then darkness. Ethan woke up in a hospital room with a sharp scent of antiseptic in the air and a dull, burning ache in his leg. A nurse was adjusting the IV in his arm, and pain pulsed in waves through his body. He tried to move but couldn't. His right leg was suspended in a brace, and his side was tightly bandaged. The doctor told him he had suffered a compound fracture, along with several bruised ribs and a mild concussion. Recovery would take months. Vanessa visited the next day, her eyes red from crying, her hand gently squeezing his. "You scared me," she whispered. "I thought I was going to lose you." He could barely speak, his throat raw and dry, but he squeezed her hand back. That gesture, simple as it was, said everything he felt. He needed her now more than ever. In the weeks that followed, things changed in small, almost imperceptible ways. Vanessa still visited, but less often. She always had somewhere to be. Inventory issues at the boutique, supplier meetings, helping her cousin with a move. Ethan noticed, but tried not to dwell on it. She was under pressure too, and he didn't want to make her feel guilty. He told himself he was just being paranoid. Eric, on the other hand, came by more frequently than he ever had before. He would sit by Ethan's bedside cracking jokes, sharing updates about their hometown, even bringing Ethan's favorite sandwiches from their childhood diner. For a while, Ethan was grateful, but sometimes he'd catch Eric glancing at his phone with a cryptic smile or rushing off without explanation. It was probably work, Ethan assumed. When Ethan was finally discharged and returned home, confined to crutches and physical therapy sessions, he felt hopeful. At least he was moving forward. But home wasn't the safe haven it used to be. The house felt colder. Vanessa was distant. They had always shared morning coffee and late-night talks. But now she was up early and home late, often claiming exhaustion and retreating to the guest room, under the pretense of letting him rest. Ethan noticed changes in her behavior. She was on her phone constantly, always keeping it face down. He tried to bring it up once gently, but she brushed it off with a tired smile. "You're recovering, Ethan. You're emotional. Let's not create problems where there aren't any." His parents were no help either. When he brought up his concerns about Vanessa, his mother looked at him with thinly veiled disappointment. "Vanessa has stood by you through so much, Ethan. Maybe you're just not seeing clearly right now. You need to be grateful she's still here." His father nodded in agreement. "Focus on healing. Don't push people away." Ethan sat silently at the dinner table that evening, watching as Vanessa laughed at something Eric said, her hand briefly touching his arm. It could have meant nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like too much. One night after Vanessa had gone out to see a friend, Ethan limped his way to the living room, needing some air. He settled on the couch with a blanket, trying to distract himself with an old movie. But halfway through, he fell asleep. He awoke to the faint creak of the front door opening. It was past midnight. Ethan, still groggy, turned his head to see Vanessa entering quietly. She didn't notice him on the couch as she walked past. Her shoes were in her hand, her lipstick slightly smudged. Ethan said nothing, just watched. The next morning, he said nothing again. He didn't have proof, just a storm of suspicion swirling in his mind. Maybe she had just been out late. Maybe she was tired, maybe. But the silence grew louder in the following weeks. Eric came over more often than was reasonable. Vanessa's laughter returned, but it wasn't directed at Ethan. One rainy afternoon, while she was out again and Ethan was left alone, he found her old phone in a kitchen drawer, one she hadn't used in a few months since upgrading. Curiosity or perhaps desperation compelled him to charge it and check. What he found changed everything. Messages, photos, flirtatious exchanges between Vanessa and Eric, plans made, nights spent, even jokes about Ethan veiled in his so strong irony. There was no mistaking it. They had been seeing each other for months, starting not long after his accident. Ethan's hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages, each one a dagger. He couldn't breathe. The betrayal was complete and worse, covered in the comforting smiles of the two people he had trusted most. He showed the text to his parents that evening, hoping for their support. Their response shocked him more than the messages. His mother looked away, eyes brimming with tears, not for him, but for the discomfort. Ethan, sometimes things happen. You've been so difficult since the accident. Vanessa has been trying. She's still here, his father added. Eric, he was just helping. These things are complicated. It was like standing in the center of a collapsing building, the walls giving way, and everyone he thought would pull him out simply stepped back. That night, Ethan sat in his room, his leg aching, heart hollowed out. Everyone had chosen the people who betrayed him. The loneliness was deafening, but underneath it, a slow, burning resolve began to grow. He would not beg for loyalty again. He would not stay silent. He would not be the fool in their story. The game had changed. He just hadn't told them yet. The days that followed were quieter than ever. Ethan went about his recovery in a mechanical fashion. Physical therapy, short walks, long silences. Vanessa acted as if nothing had changed. She still made him tea in the morning, still offered polite smiles, still played the role of a caring fiancé. Eric, too, came and went, cracking jokes and pretending everything was fine, but everything had changed. Ethan had seen the truth, and more importantly, he had saved the evidence. He copied the texts and photos from Vanessa's old phone and backed them up to a secure cloud folder. Then, he sent the file to a hidden email address only he knew about. It wasn't for confrontation, not yet. It was a seed, one he would water slowly, patiently. He didn't tell them what he knew, not right away. Instead, he observed. He paid attention to details he had missed before. The glances, the excuses, the late-night disappearances. He wasn't searching for more proof. He already had it. Now he was watching their performances unravel. One morning over breakfast, Vanessa casually mentioned she'd be out of town for a boutique convention. She had never mentioned it before. Where's the convention? Ethan asked mildly, sipping his coffee. Upstate, just for the weekend, she replied, not meeting his eyes. It's a small thing. Don't worry. Eric said he'd check on you? Of course he did, Ethan thought. He nodded and smiled faintly. Sounds nice, he said. You deserve the break that weekend. He waited. She didn't call, not once. Eric came by Saturday morning with takeout and an overly bright smile. Ethan thanked him politely, letting him talk about sports and local news. But as Eric rambled on, Ethan watched him carefully. Watched the way he fidgeted, avoided too much eye contact, overcompensated with laughter. That night, Ethan opened the folder again. There were newer messages now. Vanessa hadn't deleted anything on the cloud backup she still unknowingly used. She and Eric had checked into a lakeside in an hour away. Photos, messages, all there. He closed the folder and took a deep breath. It was time to move forward. Not with anger, with intention. That Monday, Ethan began reaching out to people quietly and strategically. Old colleagues, a lawyer friend from college, a real estate contact. He had savings and he was still legally bound to Vanessa through their shared lease and business investments. But Ethan wanted out and cleanly. He started by pulling his name from their shared accounts. Nothing suspicious, just changing billing addresses, reassigning ownership on shared online services, and beginning the process of separating his finances from hers. It would take time, but he worked steadily. He even contacted his landlord to discreetly inquire about ending the lease early. But the most important part of his plan wasn't legal, it was social. Ethan knew their small town ran on relationships, and both Vanessa and Eric were deeply embedded in the community. Vanessa through her boutique, and Eric through his local media gigs. So he decided to tell his story, not by shouting, not by accusing, but by letting the truth speak for itself. He crafted a quiet, careful email. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't angry. It was simply a message from someone choosing to walk away with dignity. He wrote, "Dear friends and colleagues, I wanted to share some personal news. Over the past few months during my recovery, I discovered that my fiancé and my brother were involved in a relationship behind my back. Though this has been deeply painful, I've chosen not to confront them with anger. Instead, I'm choosing to step away from these relationships entirely. I'm focusing on my recovery, my work, and rebuilding my life with honesty and peace. I appreciate your understanding during this transition. Warmly, Ethan Warren." Attached was a password-protected folder labeled simply for clarity. He sent it only to a handful of people, mutual friends, former coworkers, a couple of people in town who often gossiped more than they should. He knew how information traveled. Within a week, word had spread. People began pulling away from Vanessa subtly but surely. A local blogger who had previously interviewed her canceled a follow-up story. Her boutique received fewer visits, and Eric, who was gearing up to launch a podcast, found a few of his planned guests suddenly unavailable. Ethan didn't need to do anything more. He simply let the truth breathe. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed restless. She smiled more tightly. She spoke less at the dinner table. Eric visited less often and looked more cautious when he did. They were sensing the shift, but didn't know where it was coming from. Then came the evening when Vanessa asked, "Did you tell anyone about us?" Ethan looked at her calmly. "I didn't lie," he said. "I just stopped covering for you." Vanessa looked away, her composure briefly faltering. "Ethan, I never meant to." "You did," he said, "and it's fine. I'm not angry anymore." She didn't reply. He stood up, steadying himself on his cane. "I'll be moving out by next month. I've already spoken to the landlord." "But what about us?" she asked quietly. "There is no us," Ethan said, "and there hasn't been for a while." He walked away then, and for the first time in weeks, his leg didn't feel as heavy. Over the next few weeks, he tied up loose ends. He finalized his apartment rental, signed a consulting contract with a firm in another city, and prepared for a fresh start. His parents still didn't say much, still stood awkwardly neutral. But Ethan had stopped looking to them for validation. He had found his peace elsewhere. But before he left town, he did one final thing. He printed one photo, an image of Vanessa and Eric taken from one of the text exchanges, smiling in front of the inn they had visited. On the back, he wrote, "Trust isn't something you borrow. It's something you earn and protect. You broke it. I built again." He left it in Vanessa's boutique, tucked between the pages of a display journal on a shelf near the register. He never checked to see if she found it. He didn't need to. He had already moved on. Ethan stepped off the train in a new city, one far enough away from the old town to feel like a new beginning, but not so distant that he couldn't visit home if he ever wanted to. The air was different here, brisk, fresh, full of possibility. He moved into a modest apartment on the third floor of a quiet building near the park. It wasn't extravagant, but it was his. Every item, every corner, every plant in the window had been chosen by him. It became a sanctuary, a symbol of self-reliance and healing. His new job, a consulting role with a mid-sized architecture firm, kept him focused. The company had heard of his previous work and gave him projects with a fair amount of creative freedom. He found satisfaction in the rhythm of designing again, sketching structures that would one day stand tall, steady, unshaken by the storms they'd face. He spent weekends walking through the city, reading in cafes, journaling his thoughts, something he'd never done before, but found surprisingly comforting. Ethan also started volunteering with a local nonprofit that supported people recovering from physical injuries. His experience made him an empathetic mentor. He spoke at a few workshops, not about betrayal or pain, but about perseverance, about adapting when everything changes, and about the strength that comes from choosing to move forward with grace. He didn't speak of Vanessa or Eric anymore, at least not by name. They had become part of a closed chapter. The wound was still there, but it no longer bled. It had formed a scar, a quiet reminder of what he'd survived. But life has a way of circling back, gently or otherwise. One afternoon, nearly a year since he'd left, Ethan received a message on social media from a former mutual friend, Claire. They hadn't spoken much since everything had happened. She worked in marketing and had always been a neutral presence, careful with her words. The message was short. Just thought you'd want to know. Vanessa closed the boutique. Eric moved out of town, not sure where. People finally saw it all for what it was. You handled it better than anyone else would have. Hope you're doing well. Ethan stared at the message for a while. He didn't feel triumphant. Not really, just complete. Later that evening, he sat by his window, the soft sound of rain tapping the glass. His apartment was warm, quiet. The city lights blinked gently in the distance. He poured a cup of tea, opened a book, and let the calm settle in. There were still hard days. Some nights when the memories returned, not the betrayal, but the time before it. The innocent mornings, the laughter over burnt toast, the dreams shared over late dinners. Those weren't fake, even if everything after them had been. But now he saw them differently, not as lies, but as parts of a life that had run its course. A few months later, Ethan agreed to speak at a regional architecture conference. His talk wasn't just about buildings, it was about design under pressure, and how the strongest structures are the ones built to adapt. He used his own story as metaphor, never naming names, but weaving into his message the resilience of rebuilding after unexpected collapse. After the session, a woman approached him. She was around his age, a landscape designer from a nearby town. Her name was Leah. She'd been in the audience, notebook in hand, eyes attentive. I really appreciated what you said about letting go to build again. She said, I've been through something similar. Different circumstances, but the same kind of wreckage. They talked for nearly an hour by the coffee stand, and then again the next day. They didn't rush anything, just conversations quiet and real. It felt nothing like his past. It felt slow, grounded, earned. Weeks passed, then months. They kept in touch, started meeting on weekends, visiting art exhibits and parks, talking about everything from design principles to favorite books. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was peaceful. One evening, walking along a quiet street, Leah asked him, Do you ever think about what happened back then? He thought for a moment before answering. I used to think about it all the time, he said. Now it's more like a chapter in a book I've already finished reading. I remember it. I learned from it, but I don't reread it. She nodded, understanding. There was no need for more explanation. Later that night, back at his apartment, Ethan found the old file he had saved. The messages, the photos, the evidence of everything that had once hurt him. He looked at it for a moment, then selected it all and hit delete. It was time, not for revenge, not for justice, but for freedom. By letting go of the last thread tying him to that pain, he gave himself something far more powerful than revenge ever could, a future. In the years that followed, Ethan's name became quietly respected in the design community. He helped design community centers, schools, and housing developments focused on healing and resilience, places where people could feel safe, places where others could start over just like he had. He never spoke much about Vanessa or Eric again, not because he was avoiding it, but because it simply no longer mattered. Some stories don't need dramatic endings. Some just need the courage to turn the page, and Ethan had done that with both hands.